Have you ever had that feeling that something shifted permanently and there's just no going back? Not an overreaction, not fan hype running wild. It's that cold certainty that hits when you're watching a trailer and realize, right in the middle of a scene, that what you're seeing is about to completely reshape the way you look at an entire universe. That's exactly what happened when the Avengers Doomsday trailer dropped. And if you haven't fully processed everything buried inside it, hold on, because we're about to dissect every single detail. Let's start from the beginning, not from the trailer itself, but from a decision. When Marvel announced that Robert Downey Jr. was returning to the MCU, the internet detonated. But it wasn't a clean explosion of pure joy, you know? It was a mixed one. There was excitement, there was confusion, there were people questioning it, there were fans in denial, because Tony Stark's death was one of the heaviest moments in superhero movie history. Avengers Endgame closed an 11-year cycle with a scene that made full-grown adults cry in theaters without an ounce of shame. And then, out of nowhere, that same voice, that same face comes back, just not as Tony Stark, as Victor Von Doom. Think about it. Marvel didn't make this decision by accident. Nothing they do is by accident. Bringing back the same actor who spent over a decade as the emotional core of the MCU, now as the greatest villain this universe has ever seen, is a move that goes way beyond nostalgia or marketing tricks. It's an emotionally calculated construction built with surgical precision. They know exactly what they're doing, and the trailer proves it in every single second. Now let's get into what matters, frame by frame. The trailer's opening already tells you everything about its tone. No explosion, no bombastic epic music right out of the gate, just silence, atmosphere, and a camera slowly closing in on a figure you can't quite identify yet. Just a silhouette, a cape, metal. And then the voice hits, that voice, and you freeze, because your brain does something fascinating in that moment. It tries to reconcile two realities at the same time. The part of you that was shaped as an MCU fan wants to hear Tony Stark, wants to hear the sarcasm, the lightness, the I am Iron Man. But what you're hearing is cold, calculated, a voice that carries zero doubt about what it wants, what it is, what it's about to do. No hesitation, not a trace of humor, pure authority. And that is Robert Downey Jr. being a real actor. Because it's easy enough to take a famous actor and drop them into a different role. What's hard is making the audience forget the previous role while watching the new one. And what the trailer shows is that RDJ isn't here to play a darker version of Tony. Doom isn't Tony with trauma. Doom is an entirely different entity. The posture is different. The rhythm of speech is different. Even the way he occupies space in the frame is different. Tony Stark commanded a room through energy, warmth, a charm that filled every corner. Doom commands through the opposite, through the void he creates around him, through the people who step back, through the silence that precedes every word he speaks, as if the air itself knows something heavy is coming. There's a shot in the trailer, and if you missed it, go back, where Doom is standing with his back to the camera, staring at something off frame. Nobody's talking. That shot lasts maybe 3 seconds, but those 3 seconds carry more weight than most villain dialogue the MCU has ever delivered. Why? Because you don't need to see his face. The presence is already there. The threat is already there. The script is making you feel the danger without showing you anything explicit. And that is visual storytelling firing on every cylinder. Now let's talk about the armor. Guys, Marvel finally delivered. After years of fans complaining that the MCU couldn't properly adapt the aesthetic of the comics, Doom is right there exactly the way he should be. The green cape, the aged metal that looks like it carries centuries of history, the mask that expresses nothing yet somehow says everything. There's a medieval weight to the armor that contrasts perfectly with the technology it clearly houses. He looks like he stepped directly out of the pages of Fantastic Four, and that matters enormously. Because in the comics, Doom's armor isn't just protection, it's a declaration, it's a symbol. Doom wears that armor because he chose to be what he is. It wasn't a lab accident, it wasn't a curse he never asked for, it was a decision. He looked at his own disfigured face, had a metal mask forged, and told the world, "This is how I will be seen." There's an arrogance in that choice that is simultaneously repulsive and strangely admirable. And Marvel seems to have understood that on a deep level. Now, what does the trailer actually reveal about the hero's dynamic? This is where things get genuinely fascinating, because in Avengers Infinity War, when the heroes were discovering Thanos' power, there was desperation, yes, but also determination. There was the feeling that they could find a way through. Hope was still operating underneath the fear. In the Doomsday trailer, that's gone. There are sequences where you see Avengers members wearing expressions that aren't determination. There's something deeper and more unsettling. Recognition. It's the face of someone realizing that the opponent in front of them didn't make the mistake of underestimating them. It's the face of someone understanding they're being outmaneuvered by a person who planned every step decades in advance. Because in the comics, Doom doesn't lose because he's unprepared. Doom loses when he loses, which is rarely, because someone did something unexpected. But the Doom in this trailer doesn't look like someone who leaves room for the unexpected. He looks like someone who already calculated the probability of every opponent move and positioned himself 3 plays ahead. There's a quick moment in the trailer, almost subliminal, where 2 heroes are clearly at odds about how to act, and Doom isn't even in frame for that part, but the division is already happening, and you realize he doesn't even need to be present to create disorder. He already planted the seeds. That is the Doom from the comics, functioning in live action, not a villain who shows up and fights, a villain who already won before he arrived. Now I need to talk about what this trailer represents for the MCU on a broader level. The multiverse saga had problems. That's not a secret, not a controversial opinion. It's something virtually every fan acknowledges. Kang had enormous potential, but the execution fell short of expectations, compounded by circumstances outside Marvel's creative control. And so the franchise reached a point where it needed something to anchor everything back in, something that would give the audience a strong emotional reason to care again. Robert Downey Jr. as Doom is that reason, not just because he's a talented actor in an iconic role, but because he brings back the emotional investment the audience already holds. You don't need to build years of history with this villain, because the audience already has years of history with that voice, that face, that presence. Marvel took that emotional capital and flipped the sign, turned love into tension, turned familiarity into discomfort. It's one of the most ambitious narrative moves any franchise has ever attempted, and the trailer signals that they know the risk they're taking. Every visual choice, every line of dialogue, every strategically placed second of silence communicates intention. This is not a production that's winging it. This is a production executing a vision. There's a line in the trailer, short, almost subliminal, where Doom says something about order, about what the world needs versus what the world wants. And what's terrifying isn't what he says, it's how he says it. No anger, no performative arrogance, with the calm of someone who's not trying to convince anyone, because from his perspective, the conversation is already over. That's the detail that will define whether Doom becomes the greatest villain the MCU has ever had. Not the powers, not the special effects, the calm. Because the monsters that scare you most aren't the ones who scream, they're the ones who whisper. And now, after all of this, after every frame analyzed, every nuance observed, every narrative decision pulled apart, one thing still hangs in the air. If Doom genuinely believes he's saving the world in his own way, and if the story ultimately proves him right, what exactly does that say about the heroes we spent our whole lives rooting for?